All right. Let's see what's going on here. Beware, beware, beware the head fake. Because I'm not so sure about this. Yep. I'm going to watch real closly for volume and follow through and any kind of continuation we want to see. Got to be pretty careful here to not overestimate anything. So 50-point rate cut, good deal. So then we'll listen to the talk, but be careful, you know. This is the place where you could easily see head fakes, so I'm not saying you would, I'm just saying definitely would be where I would do it. So in the event of a cross up, you should find support here above 221. And frankly, I guess at that point, if the market just goes, it goes. This may push up to 230s. If that's the case, it should SOS up here. Actually, how high did this go before? Yeah, that works. Do like a 230 mark. But we'll see. So if it slides back down beneath 219, you're going to end up probably being in a distribution cycle. It's sort of like anything, you know. You got to make that move and then hold support. And then AMC pushed up a bit and then came back down to 485. Same deal. It's not really like a huge amount of volume right there. It's pretty small. So we'll see. It just hit, the news did. So it's very, very touch and go right now. We'll see. Oh yeah. No, I haven't really looked at WTO. I'm not interested. I just think it's kind of at a bottom. It's really barcoding right now. And RSI is recovered on this top, but it's kind of weak. So we'll see. It needs to hold here above 50 cents, and I think it's got a good chance of a bottom. We're going to listen to Powell talk in about 20 minutes. I'll get set up for that. Until then, what you need to know is that there was a 50-point rate cut, or at least that's what I heard through the Discord. I didn't actually check. You didn't check? No. I mean, I didn't verify. Who posted it usually to me pretty trustworthy. So I think it was posted by Hervapita. I don't know why they would make it up. 50 points makes sense because it's been looking pretty good. So the guidance will be also pretty important, and we won't hear that for about another 25 minutes. And we'll listen to the Powell talk. The Powell talk. FOMC. Yep. Quick question. Have you guys, when I go live, I know some of you don't do like the notifications and stuff, and that's fine. But those of you that do have notifications, are you getting notifications when I'm going live? And then is it only when, I guess my other question is, I kind of wonder if it's only when I put it in a playlist, because I've had some back and forth with numbers lately. I'm not a big, you guys are like, I'm a big numbers guy. Again, I didn't get one, I got one. Okay, I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's just a slow week. People are busy doing stuff. Yeah, I know. I posted in Discord. I just don't like something weird today. Maybe it's my own attitude. It's probably not YouTube. I'm not trying to be like prideful or anything, but typically like we average around 70 like 70 viewers, and today it's been consistently like 40, like 30 to 40, which is like about half of what we usually average. I think that's really odd. Maybe it's because I didn't stream yesterday, but Tuesday really usually isn't a big day anyways. It's just strange. It's like one of the most important days we've had in like 3 years. And it's just odd that today of all days. So I don't want to sit here and I'm not going to complain about it. I just wanted to ask just so I know what it's not. Like, so it's not because of some YouTube thing. It's just because the quality of the programming, Booksy. It's because your crappy internet. Nah, I just asking. Like I said, it's been really spotty today, so I'm just curious. It's just odd. And it wasn't like I was like hoping for a lot of people. That's not what it was. It's just that like, wow, it's like way lower than even average viewing. So I guess there's just a lot of people that have zero expectations, or if they do have expectations, they're just kind of waiting. And I mean, that's okay. I don't think it's wrong to look at the market and say, have a price in mind and then just kind of wait till it gets there. And I've been doing much the same thing. So a lot of the TA lately has been pretty much the same. I mean, it's the same thing over and over again. So for us, maybe the expectations are just being met and it's not really that big of a deal. Like I was saying earlier, maybe there's this idea that like FOMC is not really that exciting for people right now because they already kind of know what to expect. So they're not interested in watching the event. No. Like I said, I'm not trying to worry too much about it. I'm really not a big like numbers guy when it comes to the YouTube stuff. I found it to be odd. It's just an odd day for this to happen. So if it were like a random Tuesday or Thursday, I'd be like, whatever. That's normal. So here's what we just saw. So IWM popped. It went up pretty high. It went up to 224.53. I want to say that is about where that resistance is. I remember marking off 224. Yeah, just about. There was a reason for that beyond like local. It was like back in the 2021 top. 224 played a pretty important role. And it's like 224 up to 226. So if you get a head fake here and start sliding, I do think we're looking at those gaps. It seems like the move on a GME and AMC got gobbled up pretty quick. AMC basically went right back down to 480. Why did it reject off 484? Or 489? Sorry. Because it's not ready to go yet. I mean, if you look at the push, there's no push up volume. It's very low volume spike here that comes back above, and there's not follow through. There's no stopping power, so it just slid all the way back down. It doesn't mean it has to be horrible. It just means that, okay, this probably, you got to watch for those kinds of things. It was just a news related pump. If it holds right now, it could continue right back up. this is a support at 480. If it breaks 480, I think it's going to head right back down to 471. That'd be my best guess for that double flush up and then back down. It's been having some trouble getting lower, and I think that's a good thing. So we look at AMC, it's definitely been having some issues trying to push down. And the reason I say that is because there's decently high volume going down. It's actually kind of increasing, ramping up with these buy orders stronger and stronger as it goes down, and the selling has been pushing as well, but it's not moving fast. So it's taking a lot of effort to push it from like basically pennies, from like 498 down to 480. It's essentially like a 10 to 20 cent range is really nothing, and it's spending a lot of time walking down here. So this is my estimation for why or when we might hit 472 if that were to happen, like 471. I think you're looking at a 50-50 swing around 480. So we'll see what happens there. And it looks like my internet's not doing too hot. Maybe this is the reason why I've not been getting great viewership today, because my internet's garbage. I don't know. I think it's YouTube. I think there's too much going on or something. So last time this happened, I had to reset my my key for OBS software. It just did not want to work, and then yeah, it took forever, but I had to get it reset and everything, and then restart all the streams. It looks like we're frozen. Did we halt? Or are we just pennies on the dollar sitting here? I don't think we halted. Just chopping really hard at 480. So in order for us to see continuation, we need to get back over 484 with support. We need to push back above here. And what we just did looks a little bit more distributive because, again, it just kind of ate that whole candle. It was met with sellers like instantly. And these up thrusts haven't really tried to change direction till just now. So I haven't really paid a lot of attention to the local creeks. They're very, very minor. It's basically just a downtrend, right? Kind of a little bit of a narrowing going on, I think you could argue. And so if you were looking at this from that perspective, if that was a breakout, it just kind of went back into the channel. I mean, it kind of went back into the wedge. But if it was to break out and come back above, you might expect it to get back up to 5, which is great because 5 would be back above the major creek and probably a breakout. So for us to get back up to 5 would be pretty solid at this particular point in time. So hopefully that's what we see in terms of a bullish price action. If it goes bearish, I'm not going to go through this all over again. We'll have to watch, see what Powell says. And if anything's really dramatic or different than what's expected, maybe it crashes some things. But on the whole, I would say it's probably going to be priced in good bullish price action. So like we may get some pullback, but I think we're going to get continuation later. I've already said as much today. So locally, I'm looking at 480, maybe dropping down on this head. If this is a head fake, dropping all the way back down to 471. Not a huge deal. It sort of like reminds me of like a local spring because we did hit 472 on September 11th. There is a gap, I believe, down here at like 467 or something. It was like really small. So far, still kind of just like spending a lot of time right around this 485 level, and that's perfectly normal. You know, last week when we looked at possibility of like where we might go, I had set out for what I thought was going to be like the most likely thing, and there was really only like, I think we put 3 options. They're all the same. One was here, one was right where we ended up, and the other was like, oh well, maybe it comes down lower, you know. So we really ended up being pretty much right in the middle, and that middle path, I'd have to go back and look at it, but it was like last week we looked at this. It was basically like, oh, you're going to chop basically above this creek here, which you can see on my chart. Maybe not the best one, but you could see it. It's right there. Okay, I'm going to drop a heavier line for you to see it. So if that were to drop, I do think you'd probably head lower down to 471 first, and then we'll have to wait and see if it kept going to a more major spring action beneath 462. For GME, same deal, kind of pushed a head fake. At this point, you can't really call it anything else yet above that creek. So there's no reason to get super excited just yet about GME. It just pushed above the creek and then came right back down underneath it. Let's see. Oh, okay. Some kind of news about Ryan Cohen. It says Ryan Cohen has settled antitrust charges over his purchase of Wells Fargo shares, agreeing to pay a civil penalty of almost $1 million for breaching the Hart-Scott-Rodino Act. So I don't know what that was, insider trading or something, I don't know. Or something, I don't know. Anyways, yeah, all right, so basically on GME, 30-minute chart, we have a pretty decent divergence. It's not like the best. It's kind of soft, actually, more of like a hidden divergence. Because the moving average stayed high and flat, the price came down. It's not, maybe not the best one. I'll take that back. Gosh, like what? Don't call divergences that aren't there, Booksy. Well, it's not really because this came lower, but we'll see. Anyways, that's not really the definition of a hidden divergence anyways, so I don't know why I said that. Point is, still looking at the same potential setup. Nothing's really changed just yet. IWM, however, is pushing above the recent top, which was at 222.90. So it's done a couple pushes above that. It's not impossible that there's some kind of a need for like a phase B top with a pullback. So just be really mindful of that potential head fakes here going into the FOMC. A lot of times the volume doesn't really come in until after he's done talking anyways. You get like the truer moves. What I'm most nervous about right now is that this giant candle turns into a huge wick or something. So we got about 10 minutes till he speaks. I'm going to do my best to stream it, but if I can't stream it, we'll just listen in and I'll just comment. So we've had some trouble with the internets today, so I don't want to be pushing it to where the stream is not good at all just to try to hear him talk, because he's probably going to be saying things that are relatively expected. The big thing I want to hear is what he says about just general growth and the jobs market, and what are his comments on those things, because I think his comments on inflation are fairly in the chart. I think they're already kind of there. He said as much last time. He talked about inflation in past tense at the Jackson Hole thing, basically said it's time to change monetary policy, so everybody already knew. I think the greater concern at this point is fears of recession and yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the big one. So I think that's going to have more to do with the jobs and the earnings overall. But he's not going to sit there and comment on everybody's earnings, though he may comment on growth. We'll just see. I don't know. What are y'all's predictions? You can post them in the chat. What do you guys think he's going to say? Think he's going to be hawkish, dovish? Think he's going to mention jobs reports, outlooks? Think he's going to address recession fears, or do you think he's going to just address the rate cut and the inflationary issues. I'd love to know what y'all think about that. I'm going to get this set up. He may mention his sleep has been off. You never know. You never know. Blah, 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 blah. All right. Let's see here. Oh. Well, let's see what it shows. We got some kind of advertisement, so I'm going to mute it till that's done. So one of the things I'll have to do every time I set this up is I have to make sure that the audio, internal audio capture is working. Sometimes it works just fine, sometimes it doesn't. So we'll see. It's tricky. And I may not stream the video, I might just stream him talking, okay? So we may not see him, because that might really screw up the... Let's see if I can get it to work. Yeah, you hear people shuffling in their chairs. That's fun. What a great audio. Just getting capture of the room. It's going to end up lagging. Just love hearing the press shuffle around, chit chat. It just sounds like a big empty room. This feels like it's going to be challenging for us today. I'm going to do my best, but if it does not work, I'm just going to kill it. I hate to say that. But if it's really bad, it's just bad. So we'll see what happens. I'm trying to reduce the amount of overhead I got going on. Try to give us as best chance as possible. So what I'm going to do is just only look at the chat. I'm not going to watch the Powell stream. Why not, Booksy? Because my internet's been a bit wonky, so apparently it doesn't like me right now. Yeah, 50 points. That I don't think that was unexpected. It may have been like a little bit like, whoa, 50 points instead of 25, but they had said, I'd read a really good breakdown of what the rate cuts might look like from some analysts, and they were saying that, like, well, you probably get 225s and a 50 this year if they're trying to aim for certain kind of point reduction year over year as you go forward. So I think there was an expectation that there would be 225 cuts maybe this year and a 50 cut. Since they led with the 50 cut, it kind of brings the others into question. They may not do both 25s. Like, I don't know. They may just do like one or something. Since you're leading with like the stronger option, that does make me wonder.
Hey everybody, there are 5 minutes before the news conference begins. When the news conference
Said 5 minutes before the news conference. That's what the ladies just said.
If you have a question, please raise your hand, and Michelle Smith, who will be standing at this table over here, will call.
Yeah, it wasn't like completely unexpected.
Before you ask your question. Also, please wait until you have a microphone in your hand. They will be passed by John and Meg over here on either side of the room. Please take a moment right now to silence.
Well, Jim, I don't think that's true.
Anything that might make a noise during the press conference. And I will be back shortly with a 2-minute warning. Thank you.
You might not be right. I mean, you might be right though. What I meant about your comment is that my stream is not all about AMC. You're right. It's not all about AMC. But I very much regularly address AMC and GME. I address it every single day that I'm streaming, which is a lot. You know, that's like easily like 100+ days a year that I'm talking about AMC for hours on end. I mean, there's only so much you can say about a stock's price movement, especially when you've been going sideways for like 3 months. So I think to be realistic about it, if I was coming back every single day saying something completely different every single day, I could probably keep it pretty fresh. But there's a lot of times where we like jump a creek and then you're like, well, he's going to come down. And then you can sit there and watch it day over day over day come down, and you're just like, there's no TA to be done there. It's just, it's just walking down to a price target. So, like, I think people are tuning in maybe to get like big news and stuff. And so when there's not a lot of big news, maybe that's part of the reason. But turning my eyes to other things is not wrong. There are tons of stocks in the market. There's plenty of places to make money. I didn't talk about MPW for like 2 months. I kind of just went quiet on it. But I had that as a stock that I really believed in. And then people wanted to hear about it when it finally broke out and started running like 35%. But that opportunity was only there because I brought it up. I mean, you guys could have found it on your own. And if you didn't take that opportunity, that's fine. It's not like you had to. I just find it a bit odd. That's a weird comment to me. Like, if I only talk about AMC, it's very boring. Like, super boring sometimes. I mean, once we kind of develop bottoms and tops here and there, like, we definitely can. I think he's here. No, he's not here. He's supposed to be here like now. So, anyways, I don't know. When we hit tops and bottoms and we make some progress on different elements of this, I definitely think it's worth talking about. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff here that's like, I already had my targets from like last week. You know, when we first pushed up here, I was like, well, that's probably it for now. You're going to end up at 5 or 485 at FOMC. So you have like a lot of downtime. So I guess folks don't want to hear about other stocks. They're only invested in AMC, but that's not the market. And GME has been a little bit more interesting because of what's going on. So we've covered a lot of GME. And it did push back above this creek, so it's out. So we'll see what happens. One of the, I don't want to say it's a fear, but one of the ideas is maybe that there could be it didn't happen here, but it could happen here. There could be like a push higher in terms of like a phase B top. We don't really know that this first break is going to result in a breakout. So when I talked about it earlier in the day, doing a wave analysis, a lot of times that first creek break is not actually the big one. Sometimes that forms out like another wave, and then you end up with another drop. It seems odd, but it's usually because there's a secondary creek motion here, and there definitely is one right here. So there's usually like a higher top. This goes right back to what we were talking about earlier, you know. So this is the kind of stuff that...
Good afternoon.
Got to watch for.
My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. Our economy is strong overall and has made significant progress toward our goals over the past 2 years. The labor market has cooled from its formerly overheated state. Inflation has eased substantially from a peak of 7% to an estimated 2.2% as of August.
That's good.
We're committed to maintaining our economy's strength by supporting maximum employment and returning inflation to our 2% goal. Today, the Federal Open Market Committee decided to reduce the degree of policy restraint by lowering our policy interest rate by a half percentage point. This decision reflects our growing confidence that with an appropriate recalibration of our policy stance, strength in the labor market can be maintained in a context of moderate growth and inflation moving sustainably down to 2%. We also decided to continue to reduce our securities holdings. I will have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. GDP rose at an annual rate of 2.2% in the first half of the year, and available data point to a roughly similar pace of growth this quarter. Growth of consumer spending has remained resilient, and investment in equipment and intangibles has picked up from its anemic pace last year. In the housing sector, investment fell back in the second quarter after rising strongly in the first. Improving supply conditions have supported resilient demand and the strong performance of the U.S. economy over the past year. In our summary of economic projections, committee participants generally expect GDP growth to remain solid, with a median projection of 2% over the next few years. In the labor market, conditions have continued to cool. Payroll job gains averaged 116,000 per month over the past 3 months, a notable step down from the pace seen earlier in the year. The unemployment rate has moved up but remains low at 4.2%. Nominal wage growth has eased over the past year, and the jobs-to-workers gap has narrowed. Overall, a broad set of indicators suggests that conditions in the labor market are now less tight than just before the pandemic in 2019. The labor market is not a source of elevated inflationary pressures. The median projection for the unemployment rate in the SEP is 4.4% at the end of this year, 0.4 higher than projected in June. Inflation has eased notably over the past 2 years, but remains above our longer-run goal of 2%. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total PCE prices rose 2.2% over the 12 months ending in August, and that excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.7%. Longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation is 2.3% this year and 2.1% next year, somewhat lower than projected in June. Thereafter, the median projection is 2%. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. For much of the past 3 years, inflation ran well above our 2% goal, and labor market conditions were extremely tight. Our primary focus had been on bringing down inflation, and appropriately so. We are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. Our restrictive monetary policy has helped restore the balance between aggregate supply and demand, easing inflationary pressures and ensuring that inflation expectations remain well anchored. Our patient approach over the past year has paid dividends. Inflation is now much closer to our objective, and we have gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%. As inflation has declined and the labor market has cooled, the upside risks to inflation have diminished and the downside risks to employment have increased. We now see the risks to achieving our employment and inflation goals as roughly in balance, and we are attentive to the risks to both sides of our dual mandate. In light of the progress on inflation and the balance of risks, at today's meeting, the committee decided to lower the target range for the federal funds rate by a half percentage point to 4.75% to 5%. This recalibration of our policy stance will help maintain the strength of the economy and the labor market, and will continue to enable further progress on inflation as we begin the process of moving toward a more neutral stance. We are not on any preset course. We will continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting. We know that reducing policy restraint too quickly could hinder progress on inflation. At the same time, reducing restraint too slowly could unduly weaken economic activity and employment. In considering additional adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the committee will carefully assess incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. In our SEP, FOMC participants wrote down their individual assessments of an appropriate path for the federal funds rate based on what each participant judges to be the most likely scenario going forward. If the economy evolves as expected, the median participant projects that the appropriate level of the federal funds rate will be 4.4% at the end of this year and 3.4% at the end of 2025. These median projections are lower than in June, consistent with the projections for lower inflation and higher unemployment, as well as the changed balance of risks. These projections, however, are not a committee plan or decision. As the economy evolves, monetary policy will adjust in order to best promote our maximum employment and price stability goals. If the economy remains solid and inflation persists, we can dial back policy restraint more slowly. If the labor market were to weaken unexpectedly or inflation were to fall more quickly than anticipated, we are prepared to respond. Policy is well positioned to deal with the risks and uncertainties that we face in pursuing both sides of our dual mandate. The Fed has been assigned two goals for monetary policy: maximum employment and stable prices. We remain committed to supporting maximum employment, bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal, and keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans. We understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Steve Leisman, CNBC. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for taking our questions. In July, you said you weren't necessarily thinking about a 50. You didn't want to be specific, but you said you weren't thinking about a 50. The inflation data last week came out a little firmer than expected. Retail was strong, third-quarter GDP running 3%. So what changed and made the committee go 50, and how do you respond to the concerns that perhaps it shows that is more concerned about the labor market? And I guess, should we expect more 50s in the months ahead? And based on what should we make that call? Thank you.
So, okay, a lot of questions in there. Let me jump in. Since the last meeting, we have had a lot of data come in. We've had the two employment reports, July and August. We've also had two inflation reports, including one that came in during blackout. We had the QCEW report, which suggests that suggests that the payroll report numbers that we're getting may be artificially high and will be revised down. You know that. We've also seen anecdotal data like the Beige Book. So we took all of those and we went into blackout and we thought about what to do, and we concluded that this was the right thing for the economy, for the people that we serve, and that's how we made our decision. So that's one question. What was the second and third?
How do we make sorry, thank you, sir. How do we figure out in the months ahead, is there another 25 or 50 coming in? Based on what shall we make that call? Thank you.
Sure. So a couple things. A good place to start is the SEP, but let me start with what I said, which was that we're going to be making decisions meeting by meeting based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, the balance of risks. If you look at the SEP, you'll see that it's a process of recalibrating our policy stance away from where we had it a year ago when inflation was high and unemployment low, to a place that's more appropriate given where we are now and where we expect to be. And that process will take place over time. There's nothing in the SEP that suggests the committee is in a rush to get this done. This process evolves over time. Of course, that's a projection. That's a baseline projection. We know, as I mentioned in my remarks, that the actual things that we do will depend on the way the economy evolves. We can go quicker if that's appropriate. We can go slower if that's appropriate. We can pause if that's appropriate. But that's what we were contemplating. I would point you to the SEP as just an assessment of where of what the committee is thinking today, what the individual members, rather, of the committee are thinking today, assuming that their particular forecasts are realized.
Go to Chris.
Hi, Chris Rugaber at Associated Press. Thank you. The projections show that the Fed officials expect the Fed funds rate to still be above their estimate of long-run neutral by the end of next year. So does that suggest you see rates as restrictive for that entire period? Does that threaten the weakening of the job market that you said you'd like to avoid? Or does it suggest that maybe people see the short-run neutral as a little bit higher than long? Thank you.
I think the way I would really characterize it is this. I think people write down their estimate, individuals do. I think every single person on the committee, if you ask them what's your level of certainty around that, they would say there's a wide range where that could fall. So I think we don't know. There are model-based approaches and empirically based approaches that estimate what the neutral rate will be at any given time. But realistically, we know it by its works. So that leaves us in a place where we expect, in the base case, to be continuing to remove restriction, and we'll be looking at the way the economy reacts to that, and that'll be guiding us in our thinking about the question that we're asking at every meeting, which is our policy stance the appropriate one? We know, if you go back, we know that the policy stance we adopted in July of 2023 came at a time when unemployment was 3.5% and inflation was 4.2%. Today, unemployment is up to 4.2%, inflation's down to a few tenths above 2. So we know that it is time to recalibrate our policy to something that is more appropriate given the progress on inflation and on employment, moving to a more sustainable level. So the balance of risks are now even. And this is the beginning of that process. I mentioned the direction of which is toward a sense of neutral. And we'll move as fast or as slow as we think is appropriate in real time. But what you have is our individual accumulation of individual estimates of what that will be in the base case.
Howard.
Howard Schneider with Reuters. How close was this in terms of the decision? You do have the first dissent by a governor since 2005, I think. Was the weight clearly in favor of a 50, or was this a very close decision?
I think we had a good discussion. If you go back, I talked about this at Jackson Hole, but I didn't address the question of the size of the cut, left it open, and I think we left it open going into blackout. And so there was a lot of discussion.
8 p.m. Friday to 12 a.m. Monday.
Okay. Getting kind of like lost in the questions, and you're more than welcome to go listen to them. I don't really think at this point it matters too much. There's about 10 more minutes or whatever left. Just kind of want to look at the charts and see what we're seeing. And we got a double up thrust on AMC. The second one, it's really bizarre, but the second one went higher with more volume, but then it also had a slightly divergent RSI on like the 6-minute time frame. To be honest, I don't really know like what I'm looking at with this, because like in theory, it just looks like a double up thrust that should then slide down. But then at the same time, I'm like, not trying to like make anyone have hopium, but it's like, well, technically, this is kind of what you expect to have happen in a quadruple flush. So I'm not really sure. Like you'd expect it to push up, come back down, push up again, and then drop a little lower and then come back up. So I don't want to speak out of turn here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to watch the level around 479 and see what happens there. We're approaching it very quickly right now. So right now we're at like 480. So right on it. Totally think it's possible this could be like a double flunk or a double flush. Really, it's bizarre because there's two. So it's hard for me to interpret if it's a what we call like a UT with a UTAD, which is like an upthrust and then another upthrust. Usually that happens after a distribution, so like the nature of the distribution is in question. I don't know. I mean, it looks distributive, but it didn't make a lower low. So it's like, how small do I have to make it go to really kind of parse this out? I'm not sure. It looks a little like a little bit like a distribution, but man, this kind of stuff's tough. There's a lot of let's not do that today. I don't want to sit here and speculate. Let's just look at it. Let's just watch it. It's not exactly TA to just sit there and watch the stock move and not make any predictions or not do too much analysis. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not 100% sure what this is, and I don't really want to, I'm not being lazy, I just don't really want to try to guess, because I think it could be either, and that's where I'm kind of stuck. It reminds me of a double up thrust, like the UT-UTAD. But I know that a quadruple flush does that sometimes on a bottom, where you'll get like a push. I think that's where I'm a little lost right now. So you'll get a push, and then it will come like higher, and then it'll come down. But I'm wondering if we already did that, because technically we already had a push up early yesterday, or late yesterday. So it seems like it already made that move and then had weakness here before coming up again. So to me, it looks like there's already been a sign of weakness, and that's why I'm hesitant to say much more. Sorry. It is what it is. You're like, no, dude, it's going to rock it. I mean, the easiest way to tell if something's distributing or not, if you don't know what a UT is just draw the creek. So I just tapped it on here real quick. And you can ask the simple question, like, did it hold the bigger breakout? The answer is no. So it pushed up once, pushed up twice, did not hold the bigger breakout here. So it's definitely, at this point, looking more like sell the news, where you're going to see that drop. So this is setting up for like a flush, where they bring it up and get sellers on, bring it up, get sellers on. A lot of selling volume here, but it's not moving very far. Then the second creek is right here, which really should be met at 479, maybe 480. And it is still meeting that, so it's hard to say. It hasn't broken that yet. Does it have to break that book C to come down? No, but it would be faster. So if it took its time, it could definitely chop the rest of the week down this way. There's nothing new about that. Based on where we are, I would suggest to you that these are up thrusts back to 490 that are not, I mean, it doesn't look great. It looks like it's trying to distribute around 484. So just being honest, like, if it doesn't break and hold above 484, I don't have any hope for a run. So at this point right now, I'm kind of like, not any hope. I just mean like right now. Like I wouldn't think, oh, it's going to run right now. No. And this has already been written in. It's nothing new. So we were talking about this earlier, and last week even, talking about maybe the possibility coming back down. So what's going on here is it's like you're getting repeated attempts to pass back above 484. You see that? And then it's like really low trading. So it just looks like distribution to me, like a lot of push-ups, 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 push-ups. And they are pushing the creek up, but they're not holding any of these advances. So at this point in time, like it just looks more like a distribution starting to sell down. And that this walk down has been methodical, and that kind of whip around 484, but it looks like it's ending with the distribution side, not the accumulation side, which would be far better. So for now, unless we break back above 484 and hold it, which is, it's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible, because again, this is super fast. Maybe I'm like just jumping the gun a little bit. We still got an hour left in the trading day. We'll see what happens. It hasn't broken this other creek yet, so it hasn't broken either of these. So I think it's up in the air, but unless it comes back above and holds support above 485, and I'm not just saying that because I like 485. I'm saying that legitimately, like that's what needs to happen right now from a technical perspective in order for it to advance. This just looks distributive to me. And I would have said the same thing earlier today, and I did say as much. I said I thought there's a possibility it could come down. So, yeah. It could break below 4, but it have to be, it had to be like after this hook at 430. This is not a definite thing. This is definitely not a definite thing. And in fact, on the big picture here, it's not even, I don't want to be argumentative. I just want to make sure that I'm clarifying what I've said before so people don't try to put words into my mouth, because I don't like that. I just find that to be really uncomfortable when people say I say things, I didn't really say that. So the analysis on AMC has remained much the same since about a week ago. And really, if you look back, it's been pretty similar since the beginning of September, because I had suggested we might need an upthrust. I thought it came too high back here, but this one's been fine. There's really nothing really to say about it. But you have to understand, like, the nature of these moves is multifaceted. Like, on the one hand, you're looking at it like, well, it's technically making higher highs, Booksy, higher lows here. Yeah, it was, and that could be a really positive thing. But then what are they doing? Where are they distributing, right? And ever since we started walking down this sort of step ladder in July, and it's been a long time coming, we've been basically making lower highs. So every time we push back up, we don't make as high of a high. They've turned from, we've had 560s as tops, then we had 550s, then we had 520s, and now we're at a point where we've jumped 1, 2, 2. So this is the first jump, and it held. It definitely held. It hasn't broken yet. So we leapt over 1. We tried to leap over 2. We failed, and we dropped back down, back to 1. Then we leapt over 2 again, but we still haven't held 2, and that's this yellow line. So another part of the reason why this has been a really boring slog is because a lot of the price action lately has just been chopping in these channels and not finding supports where we want them. Right now, there's absolutely a positive outcome if we can come back above 5 again. Every time we've dropped, we've lowered that floor. That's important because if and when you do break out, then you don't have anything else here. We've got one marker up here at like 535, and then that's pretty much it, right around 550. Like that's pretty much it. So the good news is that, like, once you break here, it's like, well, there's nothing else. There are no more creeks. So it's hard to describe that when you're walking down, that feeling of like, well, we're not going to ever break out or whatever. We just keep bonking our heads. We are making progress. And at this point, we've jumped 1, 2, 3. And all 3 of those, well, we've jumped 2 major ones, and all of those have been very positive. So those are good signs. The problem is that we haven't busted over the very last one yet. It's not that complicated, pretty straightforward. Like, it's right here. We just haven't broken it. But if you wanted to say, like, well, is there another one? Is there another one? Not really. Like, the next one would be considered the SOS range, and that's way up here. I don't think that's an accident. Like, that's usually the way it works, is there's like a final creek near the SOS. So this interception here at the top, this is the last possible creek that you could draw. And I wouldn't even draw it that way. Again, I would draw it like over and then down. So this jumps over and then should find support here, and then it would just go. And there's nothing else. Like, there is nothing else in terms of creeks. There's none. You can't draw anything from the top. It's too steep. So unless you push up and make a new high here, like if you made a new high at 550 and pull back, maybe there'd be another one. But that's it. Everything else here is just structural lines to kind of help me do what I do with the drawings. So that makes it really simple because there's not that many options in terms of like, where do you go? Well, we're pinned. Yeah, I know. We're pinned at 485 or 480s. Yeah, I know. What if we drop here? What if we lose this little local creek? Okay, well, it's a local creek. So then where does the next drop go? Well, look at the double flush. Pushing up to 490 and then driving back down 50-50 over that floor, which is just typically like the average of how a flush works. Up X amount, down the same amount, you know what I mean? That sell-off should get you back down to maybe 470. And then that looks like a test on this bottom creek. Let me ask you guys, and let's just look at it and be honest. Like, we don't need to like sugarcoat it to make people happy. Has it checked this creek? This yellow creek, which is the second one. So I said there's like number 1 and number 2. Number 1 jumped, and it definitely checked it here and multiple times. It's been checking it for a long time, and then it finally pushed out. Number 2 has not tested yet. So I know it looks like, well, it kind of looks like we bonked our heads here and then checked it here. This is not really a check because it passed through it and then back above it and did like a micro back test. And I was saying like, that's why I didn't necessarily have a lot of bullish opinion about this particular move at the top, because it just seemed like we didn't come back and check certain levels. So maybe this happens really slow, and that's an option that I didn't really put on the chart. But there is that tiny little gap down here at like 467. And, if you imagine this thing kind of like chopping sideways into Friday I think starts right, or Monday starts right there. I think you get pretty darn close to that interception of that gap by Friday. If it just chopped down and didn't really move very fast, I could see that as a possibility, like right here, coming into this potential. It's a very, very small gap. Why is that important? Well, twofold. One, that's 465, which is basically like the floor. We talked about that. It's the main one that's being used. That's maybe point A. Point B would be that there's a gap there. And then if I were to add a C to it, it would be that if you're going to establish any kind of an actual spring, you would do it on this level. And it would probably dump below 461. So this is the place you would need to be, potentially. Now, I've made a lot of concessions and allowances for possibilities of what's called an LPS. And an LPS is where after you push up and then try to drive the price low for liquidity, and if you're paying attention, it's the exact same language that you talk about with a spring, that instead of going all the way down, you distribute and then you end up not going down all the way. And certainly, like, anything could happen there. So we just dumped that creek locally and dropped like 3 pennies. But that could certainly be very fast. You could see that as a quick move down to find a support. Does it have to come below any of these other values? No. The thing about an LPS is it will often pick common sense values. Like, it might double bottom on a previous support, like one at 480 or 471 or something like that. So like we look at that and we're like, sure, that's also like close to that 50-50. Any of those are possible, I don't see it as a bad thing. It's just kind of there. So what we're doing is we're interpreting the data as it comes to us, and so far we were right. This looked like a little bit like a head fake, and then it did a double up, and then it dropped all the way back down through, and it looks like it's trying to breach the creek. So you're using that upward momentum to drive the price back down. So that 470 could be pretty positive. I don't think that's a negative. And again, if I'm looking at this as like, well, could it just be this or that? Yeah, man, like it totally could. It totally could. You could have a bounce on 470, spend a day or so rejecting at 476, and then come down Friday to 465 or whatever, And the weird thing about it is like that could be it. I mean, I've said that before, but the way that these set up is typically like that, where you're going to kind of drive the price low. And if it's not it, then the only other thing that's left is basically like a final drop, which would be just like a slog down potentially into somewhere sub 461. What I mentioned about GME and AMC earlier in the day was that big picture drop. If it goes really far, how far could it go? And I think this could go to sub 440. It'd be like right at 440 rather, and between 440 and 430. And I said, I thought that GME is the same thing. It could easily see a drop down to somewhere between 1770 and 1830. So much the same as AMC, you're seeing a fake out break here, and then it's driving the price down. Sellers are taking it back down, and they're trying to use that as a way of kind of leveraging to get back down to a lower spot. Couldn't tell you exactly where it is, but usually, again, it's about a 50-50 swing. So it looks like 1874, which seems to be a previous support level that I've marked off. And that definitely seems possible. So is that within our window? It's probably pretty close. I said sub 1830, but it is what it is. So we'll see. I'm not sure where this one comes from. I'd have to look. I got it on this here too as like 1867, but I have to go back and check. That really is more like big picture flush. Like if IWM doesn't hold right now and it's already kind of pushed high and then come back down, I cleaned up my chart a lot because I wanted to see that level really clearly. So it pushed up above 222.58 all the way to 224.94 basically, and then it's been coming back down. This would be a back test on the creek, and it needs to hold this in order to continue. You've got pretty major divergence on the 30-minute here with that rounding down, as you can see on RSI. So one of the things I talked about was the possibility, and I just tried to clean it up to make it clearer, that this could be like a head fake zone into FOMC and then sell down. I still think that looks possible. It doesn't look way out of the realm of possibility to me. So I'm really going to watch keenly. This level's not that important, but I'm going to really watch keenly that 219.56 level, 219.60 level. And that's going to give me a pretty decent indication if it breaks below that it's going down. It could go maybe slightly below. There's a gap here down to like 217.80. So maybe that'd be a better place to put it, slightly below there. Jeez. Beep. Bonk. Yep. So I don't think I said 4 as a matter of like fact. Like I didn't think like for a fact it was going to drop down there. And I've actually said kind of the opposite, that I didn't think that 4 was the floor. Because I had some people ask me about so-and-so, like some people were like, oh, so-and-so says it's going to go to low 4s, or so-and-so says it's going to go to this number or this number, you know, and it has to go this low. And I'm like, maybe, but there's a problem with that, which is that you're talking about liquidity and you're talking about a range. I don't think the range goes down to 4. I think that's wrong. I think the range goes down to 460, and it doesn't go as high as some of the highs. Like we've consolidated greatly in a particular zone, and as you start breaking those zones, things get hairy pretty fast. Like you end up in a really bad situation. So for now, I'm just taking it level to level, and I have been adamant that I don't think it's going to go down that low. But I'm making allowances that I think 430 would be okay. I don't think that it's the best possible outcome for us, but if it did drive down here, then we'll watch, because I think it and GME could both have a really substantial floor down there that could be met. Seems like too far. You know, again, it's like, look at where we're breaking down from and then take it from there. You're breaking down right now. It's clearly hooking and dropping from like 490. So I have 496, but let's just call it 490 because 490 is where it actually had a floor and then it just hooked there a few minutes ago. So I think 490 is a better number than 496. 496 is kind of the upper echelon of that range, but 490 is the number, y'all, for sure. I mean, you can see it right here. And so I would say like 490 right now seems to be that ledge. So one of the things we've talked about recently is this concept of like, if you have a liquidity need and you don't get an LPS and you go into a spring, can you expect to make like a 50-50 from the spring back up to an SOS? And the answer is yeah. Like that's pretty typical. So if we went down to like 436, we dropped just slightly below 441 or something. Would that give us enough oomph of a swing to go around 490 and get above an SOS? And the answer is yeah. I mean, that gives you a 550 hit. Is that enough? It could be. I mean, technically, I think that's the top. So is that fine? Like, yeah, I think so. So if you go a little bit deeper than that, you get a little bit higher. You get what I'm saying? So I think that conceptually, like, the idea of it dropping might seem weird. And we're like, well, again, like so-and-so said the bottom was already in. Or, you know, you said you thought the better spring was just below 461. Into 450s, and you said you thought yeah, it is, but for a terminal shakeout, if you're just going to do that drop, it's not bad, you know. And it could be that's maybe in some ways that's the best position for this spring. I mean, you see the high liquidity shelf, we've been sitting on it. My biggest concern right now is the distribution off 5, but look at this low liquidity pocket from like 467 down to 440. If I'm going to position myself for a potential spring action and do like a quadruple flush where you rapidly, you know, buying up the range, this might be a better place to do it. And I mean, you could do it all this week for all we care. Going into Friday, it could definitely be like all this week. That's a spring right there. You know, like potentially. It's just a boom, 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 and then it's done. And walks back above the 464 floor, and then Monday it's like right there and it just takes off. And I wouldn't even bat an eye at that. So we talked about this before, like that's a potential, but the only real risk you have is just bleeding below this bigger creek that we have at, and I think going below 430 is dangerous. I do, for the sake of AMC. I think at some point you have to kind of just say it is what it is, like could be distribution. We've had some elements of that here, you know, where it's kind of up thrusts. I'm on the 1 hour and it already looks like it's about to be oversold. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. It can be oversold, bounce, and come down and be oversold again. It's done that a couple times, but usually that's about as far as it goes. I don't see any other examples like locally in this area where it's done that and made significant new lows. So the first place it bounces may not be the place that it stays, but then you're going to watch and see if there's a second one. So if it bounces here at like 474, I'll be watching it pretty keenly to see if it drops low. And I've put it real low here, but I mean, like I said, it could be in this zone too. I don't really think it matters that much as long as it's beneath 461. So this area is all good. Like I have it blue because I think this is a potential spring zone, like this whole zone. I have no problems if it comes no problems if it comes below here. It's like I don't really care. As long as it reverses and gets back above. If it drops too low and it loses the middle of this other range, that's where we're going to run into some issues. And at some point, you gotta just kind of be like, well, maybe it just needs to go down there, Booksy. It needs to go to 4. It has to bottom on 4. We didn't get enough of a bottom on 4. We need more liquidity traded on 4. I don't know. All I can say is that at that point, like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? It's strange to me. Because there's a range back here that was built out from 4 up to about 460s. I mean, it topped off around 475 maybe, but this is a range that we've already explored, we've already traded it, and dropping beneath 430 puts us in the lower 50% of that range, which is tantamount to us essentially marking down. I mean, if you think about a range, you're always next to another range, right? Like at that point, it's like, well, what's to prevent you from marking down, you know? It's a good question. That's why I've got like this scary kind of drawing here of like a hook, because if it hooks right here, I don't really see what's preventing you from necessarily just dropping through and then heading to those lows, low values. So yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the most important days that we've had. I didn't really expect it to do anything too crazy. I was feeling a little more like sell the news. We've had a meager reaction to the rate cut, but that's expected. I think maybe into the end of the week this week, going into next week, we're going to see more, hopefully, of the result of that. More accurate, perhaps, depiction of the results. And I don't think that it's necessarily a big deal right now, that it kind of did a double pump here. It's whatever. Yeah. We'll see. Man. Well, maybe it's just a sign that I need to get off because it's just like really low viewership all day today. Maybe it's just other things to do. I'm working on an animation project, and it's hard. I think animating fish is not really my thing. I don't really like it. It's been really tricky. So I've been trying to like do a good job. I always want to do the best I can do. It's hard, man. They're weird. Like in some ways it's easy because it's like they're really just like one body part. I mean, they have like fins and flippers and junk, but I'm not making like a cartoony fish. I'm making just like a fish swimming. So I don't have to animate all the little parts and make it look like a cartoon character. It's just a fish. So I get to make it more realistic, naturalistic. And so it's just a fish moving in the water. So it's basically like one big motion. What's complicated is I'm a dummy and I decided I was going to do like a camera move. And I do 2D animation. So I don't know what I was thinking. I did this with a wolf once, like a wolf animation. And what I ended up doing was I decided to use a 3D model. So I got a 3D model of a wolf. And I animated a wolf run cycle. And then I did a camera sweep in the 3D program around the wolf model. So it was all hand-done animation. Like the animation was all mine, 100%. So first I made this really elaborate wolf animation in 3D that ultimately was just used to help with the camera move. And then I didn't rotoscope it because it had to look like her logo. So I kind of went back and used like a gentle, maybe gentle rotoscoping is a better way to put it, and mapped the 2D animation on top of it so I get the 3D effect, but in two-dimensional space. And then I illustrated the logo, you know, it moving. So 100% my animation. Like I didn't steal the animation or use like a live action reference. I thought about doing the same thing for this fish because I decided I want to have like a weird camera motion. And then I was like, why did I do that? Like that's super complicated. So instead I've been like mapping it out. I have like all the features mapped to like arcs and junk. It's super mechanical. If you think this is random, it's not. It's totally like what I do here. It's very construction based. I like construction lines. So I was doing that in my animation. I was like, gosh, this is quite a technical piece. It's a little bit devoid of life sometimes when you do that. You got to be careful. Animation needs to have like exaggeration and good staging and good movements, effects that, things that kind of bring it to life, squash and stretch. You can't just do it like super realistic, otherwise it looks boring. So you still have to make it good. But I am a very like technical person when I animate stuff. I like it to be physically kind of make sense and smooth. I shot myself in the foot though. This client, I'm gonna have to ask them for an extension on the project. He's cool though. He's this guy that does like movies out in California. He does like B-rated horror films. And for some reason, he also owns like a fishing charter business. I guess he does both. It's really strange. He does a lot of different stuff. They make a lot of money in their fishing charter business. I looked up their prices. I was like, geez, man, these fishing trips, dude, charge you like a fortune to go fishing. But I guess they're trying to guarantee that you're going to get some like wall mounting catch for your exploration. So he had me do a fishing logo for his TikTok account, which is always kind of boring because they're usually really fast. You have to do them really fast. But then he had a completely other new logo for a second fishing charter thing, and he was like, I really want this one to be better and like longer and nicer and stuff like that, you know, in terms of like the timing and all that junk. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. But man, I don't know why I do that to myself. I give myself like really bad deadlines sometimes. You'd think I would learn. I've been doing this since I was in my early 20s. I have learned, but I think the bigger problem is that I get more and more ambitious too. So I used to do like simpler stuff. Now I'm like, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm going to make it as complicated as I possibly can. Because why not? No one in the world will see this fish animation except for the people that, you know, watch his YouTube videos or something. That's going to be it. It's like, why do I do this to myself? I don't know. You're not sitting here like making the next Mickey Mouse, Booksy. You're just animating a fish. Man, today was rough, huh? I think I'm like emotionally like, I don't know, it's not there. This ain't therapy, you know? This ain't therapy. I feel emotionally trapped. It's not therapy. But you know how some days you just have like really good days, your energy's really high, and you're like, yeah, let's go, woo, conquer the world. You know? You feel good. Today should have been one of those days because I felt like this was a big deal for the market. I tried to do that. So yesterday I was trying to be calm, like relax so I could have a good day today. And I had like really crappy dreams. And dreams are just dreams. But I've been dreaming like bad dreams like constantly. And that stuff like gets to you. Some people anyways. Some people are like, nope, sure doesn't. That's like top shelf stuff. I don't ever look at it again. I'm like, yeah, I know. Maybe I should just make it top shelf stuff. Never look at it again. But I had like 4 dreams in a row that were bad dreams. I'm like, geez, these are really like bad dreams. I was talking to my wife about it this morning. And she was like, I'm not Freud. I was like, no, I'm just kidding. She didn't say that. I was like, yeah, I know. Let me tell you about my dreams, wife. And then I want you to pretend like you're a therapist and you can give me the answers and interpret my dreams for me. So silly. I'm just messing with you. I told her about them and then I said, I think this is what they mean. And then I walked out of the bathroom and that was it. That was like the whole conversation. She didn't even say anything about it when she came back. I love it, dude. It's so fun. It's so funny. Because I know my wife, I'm like, she did not want to answer those questions. And I didn't make her answer them. But, yeah, man. So I just feel like I could have woken up today and been like super hyper and excited and I don't know. Maybe that would have changed everything. I have no idea. Come on here and just been like AMC and GME, woo! And then we would have like 1,000 people in here for FOMC, and everybody's like, "Let's go, Powell! Let's go, Powell!" Y'all are like, "Nah, man. This ain't like those other places." No, it's not. And I think that, yeah, maybe some of it's just attitude, like you have to bring the attitude, bring the right attitude to the game. Maybe I didn't do that this morning. Too low energy. I went and listened because I shared that. I know it sounds a little silly, like, oh, you just listen to yourself talk, but I shared that video on the Discord. I shared what I talked about this morning, and I was thinking, because someone had asked me about it. They said, do you want to, they didn't ask me, they said, do you want to do this? They were like, can you please talk about sine waves and like that 50-50 kind of stuff that you talk about? And I was like, sure. They were asking about creeks and sine waves, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. We do that most days anyways. So I went into like a pretty long explanation of it, but it was a summary. I mean, it's not really something I do all the time to break down every little bit and piece. So I did that early in the day, and I shared it with them, and then I was like, how does this sound? Is this something I want to like edit and post again? And the first half of it is like super slow, and I'm just sitting there like, well, like this, and then like this, and oh, let me fix this, and I'm like, blah, blah. I'm like, man, that's kind of boring, It's kind of boring. And then the second half like picked up, and I was like, no, the second half's pretty good. I kind of scrubbed through it just to hear it. And I was like, yeah. You can't fix what you can't measure, so it's kind of if you have no feedback. So I was trying to like give myself feedback. Like, I wonder if that was it was a pretty good explanation. I think there was some complications that I may have, like one thing I noted was I didn't talk about this creek jump very much. And I don't know why I didn't do that, but for some reason I didn't talk about this big creek jump nearly as much as I could have. Because the question was specifically about that. It was specifically about how does a 50-50 creek jump work? Why does it mechanically work? And it has to do with the setup being where it is. Like, and then I didn't really address specifically the creek, although I did address the 50-50. So I kind of screwed that up. Otherwise, I thought it was a pretty good little explanation. And I do think it applies easier in practice than it does in lecture form. If you're just listening to somebody talk about it, it can feel very boring and like it's mathematical and kind of sluggish. Like, man, why am I listening to this guy talk about this, But if you apply it in practice, it's really exciting to see it work and to see it kind of build out. So we're using WTO as an example, and frankly, it's been a really bad example on my part because it's been like not fulfilling potential here. And maybe that's just because it's not going to. We don't know for a fact this is going to do X, Y, Z. I think there's a strong chance it's going to go up to about 95 cents, 90, maybe 92 cents this week, potentially. But like a lot of that's going to depend on everything else going on, like we would not expect this to necessarily move opposite the market just because. So it's weird because it's already having like a breakout moment. It looks like it's getting ready to go, becoming overbought really fast. What is going on, man? So yeah, I think that the nature of like the market as it is right now is kind of boring because we're not seeing any kind of major huge movement. Everything looks really red. Even the upside is kind of marred by me talking about head fakes and all their junk. But I think we're about to move into an era of big moves. Like I think next week, maybe early next week, we're going to start seeing that really work itself out. Maybe even this week because it's Wednesday. We still have 2 days. But then I think going into October, yeah. And the Glenn Miller crowd can come back and rub it in my face. We didn't really move till October. That's fine. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I really don't dislike Glenn Miller. I don't like that he comes in sometimes, drops a note, and then leaves. I find it to be a bit, I don't know what the word is, maybe patronizing or something. Like, I know something you don't know, and then I'm gonna just say it and leave, like mic drop. I don't particularly like that, but other than that, like he's fine. Like he's been really right at sometimes with his bear targets. And the only time he wasn't really right was when he said we weren't going to go over 5 till October. And he's still kind of right if it runs in October because we've been chopping along 5. He obviously wasn't right about the May run, you know, if you look at just the May run up. But in theory, like some of that stuff ended up being pretty accurate. So I don't have anything beef against him. I just didn't have the same TA. So it happens. And sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. That's that. And then some other folks that have been around called for bigger moves that didn't happen, and like they disappeared too, and I don't know where they went. Dave's like not been on here very much, not been commenting. But some of these folks have had really good TA and just kind of come and go. He may come back to rub my nose in it in October if it runs later, but my point is I think it's about to go. I don't think there's no other catalyst. Like what else are you waiting for, you know? The market doesn't need anything else, in my opinion. So it's really just a matter of, does it hold this creek right now? Does it advance early? Do we get a pullback? And I think both cases are still bullish. I don't personally see a market drop as very, very viable at this moment. Not small caps, okay? It's different for large caps. For the S&P, you might be able to make that argument, but that's that. So we'll see. September is historically a really bad month for the markets. It doesn't typically do very well. So this September really didn't pan out any different. It's essentially just flat. But we've also been pretty flat for a while. And arguably, I mean, you can blame whatever you want to blame, but like arguably, like blame the Russell 2K, blame the small caps, the ETFs, because they've been flat since July. Like after that big July run up, we barely got a piece of that on AMC. It's really just been sideways chop. I mean, that's the dominant action here, is just sideways around, 214s or whatever, and that's it. I mean, there's not been an advancement, so everything's been basically just repositioning and getting ready for the next move. So it is what it is. I don't know why I thought that AMC would take off significantly earlier, because I did have this chop built in. I thought it was going to come up. I'd love to go back and see that chart. I wonder if it was like significantly different. I remember this number was off, but then I thought it was going to like go here. This is pretty much what I thought would happen, except that this went a bit higher than expected. This went way lower than expected. Would not have expected it to come back down, but I thought we would come back and retest this top here at 208 to 207. That's where I thought all of this SOS stuff would happen. Kind of been doing that. We've just been doing it in like a really broad way. I can't really complain. I'd have to go back and look. And I think originally I had it going up September 11th because I was somehow mistaken that was when the FOMC was. You guys are like, what? I don't know. I just had it in my book or my brain. Oh, it's going to be there. So I thought we would drop into that and then take off. It's not too far off. So I don't know what my expectation was. I guess because of what happened back here, it's probably what it was, is that in May, after the initial run-up, IWM ran like 80%, and then AMC and GME took off. I think I was expecting something similar. Like I think I was expecting AMC and GME to take off here like mid to late July as a secondary action, kind of like what happened here. And it never happened. It just stayed flat. So then it's like, well, I don't really see very much opportunity till August, because there'd have to be a buy up here in August. And then it's the same deal. And you just chop sideways, same exact setup back in early September again. So We'll see. Maybe October will be different. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, the next catalyst is the election. So there's definitely a lot of news about that. I'm not going to really talk much about MPW. I think it's pretty much as expected here. I was expecting it to kind of chop down. So I haven't really changed very much, and it looks about right. It's wedged right now between a gap to the upside and a gap to the downside. It's very strange. So there's kind of a weird little range here. That's like a gap above and a gap below. And it's kind of dancing between the two. I still suspect it needs to come back down to this top. There was another reason for that. Let me go back. Yeah, because it made a preliminary supply effort right here at 555 and then gapped up. And then that particular level is a supply zone, and it was one that was established, again, pretty far back in time. You have to go all the way back to, I think, late 2023. Yeah, about a year ago. So this is a 1-year sequence. This is September 21st. So it's literally exactly a year, basically. If this comes back down and hits on like September 21st and then bounces, it's exactly 1 year. So I don't know. It just, looking at it big picture, that's what seems obvious to me. Like it would have to hit that level. Unfortunately, there's also a pretty major creek down fairly low at like 534, and unfortunately, even though it did do a backup all the way back to 507 on that day when it broke out, unfortunately there is a gap at 481. So you guys are like, not 481, no, not the AMC number. Yeah, it's the same number. So I'm a little nervous about that for MPW, but on the whole, I think if it found support between 555 and 537, I think it'd be in really good shape. Just take off to the upside. So I still expect end of the month into October to be really good, be really positive. I'm just kind of waiting to see how low we go on this dip and if we can find continuation shortly after that. Yeah, I don't think I broadcasted necessarily the expectation that the Fed meeting was going to rocket the stocks. I think I was pretty even level-headed about it. Maybe the bigger issue is that with viewership being kind of lower is that it's easy to kind of, I remember Booksy talking about rate cuts for small caps, meaning we're going to move. It's like, well, yeah, but short term, that's not what we've been talking about. We're very much of the opinion, in my mind, that it's probably going to result in some kind of a potential drop. Now, I will say, though, that at least for now, if IWM manages to hold 220, which it doesn't seem like it wants to, it really looks like it's positioning itself for like a recoil back to the lows. Definitely feels like sell the news. It could be in a good spot if it can hold this, but I don't expect it will. So now here's the good news about all this. If you're somebody that's like, man, this sucks. I'm so tired of talking about pullbacks. I just want it to go already. When is the spring going to actually be a spring? I don't expect anything else after this. So, I mean, if it doesn't move here, I have nothing. Like, I don't know why it wouldn't, if it jumps the creeks after making a low here. Like, I don't see why it wouldn't just go. And at this point, it just doesn't make sense. It would not make sense to me. So that's not exactly comforting, but it is something to think about because I don't believe that there's much you can do here except spring or drop out. So like anything below 460 or even right before then as a support and then jumping that creek, once you advance here, it's done, dude. Like the wave is finishing. Should go back up to the top, and then we'll either get the SOS or we won't. So, yeah. I don't know. That may not be very comforting to some, but to me that's very comforting because I'm looking for an opportunity, especially on some of these tickers, to get that buy-in that I want. And this is a good opportunity, potential for that buy-in right here. Yeah, but yeah. You're asking about WTO again. I want to one more time address it. So the one more time. I don't feel the same about this as I did about previous ranges because it's absolutely running out of space and it's shrinking and all that jazz. There's not much of a question in my brain so much as like volume driving the price low, RSI coming back up. It's just kind of running out of space. It did push sideways a couple times here, and both times seemed to push outward about the same amount. But it's sort of eking across what might be considered a creek down here finally, and I don't see it as a overly negative thing. It just kind of looks like, okay, like maybe it's about to go. You can see it just keeps kind of making gentle advancements while it's pushing down, but that's normal. And also these 50/50s, they keep building up. So every time it's done this drop, yeah, it's been a little worse maybe each time, or a little less worse each time because it's not dropping as far. And that's good. When is it going to stop? I think 50 cents does make a lot of sense, no pun intended, but it was a level that someone asked me this morning. They said, well, how low do you think it could go? And I said, maybe 50 because of the nature of where this is. It doesn't have to be that way. Could it break down and go down again? Yeah, I mean, there's always like lower lows on a stock till you get to zero, but I like the setup as it is. You know, I think worst case, it's hard for you even to make this argument because it's just not really a good argument. It doesn't really look like it would go below 50 cents. Oh, you said this about this. No, I mean, early on we talked about sliding low. We talked about coming down and potentially dropping back to when we're up here. We said, well, you know, when you look at the sign of weakness, it definitely had it positioned really low. It looked like it was going to come back down and hit that mark, and it did. Then you have to just kind of wait and see if it reacts well, and it did not. It did an up thrust. So then you're like, all right, now what? And you look at the next one, you know. And these are just things that progress as you go, and you're looking at the waves trying to measure them out. So I'm not particularly worried because you might think like, well, it's passing by all these points that are, you said you were maybe pivots or they were going to be, well, yeah, it's passing them. But there's still more. And there's still a decent one up here, even into Friday. So I'm feeling like pretty optimistic about it. And it's not doing something right now that makes me feel uncomfortable. It's kind of just building out really tiny, which is very typical for a micro iteration to get to this kind of nitty gritty spot. You guys are like, what are you talking about, dude? Talking about micro iterations? Look, these are M crosses, right? And they keep getting smaller. And they started fairly large. So when I look back at this, I can't help but think like it's definitely possible that breaks out into a pretty massive, and this one's kind of tricky. I think it's here. But yeah, I definitely think it's possible that it's about to be finished. and break out. And this is a very logical spot. So maybe, unfortunately, the only thing I can say that's changed right now, you guys are like, well, this morning you said it was 112. Well, so there is a target at 112 for sure. It's there on this, but there's actually another wave target that looks a little bit better to me. And it's a bit bizarre, but it's only at 93 cents. I don't really know why that is. Maybe it's because it's kind of the middle of this flush, and that might signify something important to someone. I really couldn't tell you. I'm not good for that right now, but it's like right there. So I don't particularly understand why it is at 93 cents, but that's where I saw it. So that's still a good move. It's still a huge move. It's like 100, 120, 100% or something like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. But it's not quite a breakout. So I'm wondering if maybe what we're seeing is really the top of the trend, it coming back up to the trend top here, and then who knows, like maybe there needs to be a backup. And that could be pretty significant. These kind of drops can be really crazy before they move. So I've got it very tepidly drawn out over here. Like, oh, this just does this nice little la 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 up to the top and then breaks out. But, you know, in reality, if it goes up to 90 something cents, it might get a really harsh sell off back down to like 60 cents or something. We don't know. You know, and that would not be out of the realm of possibility because of the Red Creek jump. I think it's certainly an option. So right now I'm kind of the mindset that seems likely to me, and then we'll see after that. Do I think it's a really, really powerful swing trade potential? Yeah, for sure. I've been talking about it because I think it's a good trade. It doesn't mean you have to trade it. It doesn't. Some things are meant to be like long-term trades. This is not one of those things. I'm like, nope. This is not designed to be like some kind of long-term trade. This is a very simple, like quick scalping type trade, you know? Like you find the good bottom, you wait for the breakout. When the breakout happens, you wait for that confirmation. It's going to be layered up. Right now it's at like 50 cents. 60 cents, 75 cents, and then $1.12. And those are the layups, like one, you know, big picture to small picture to big picture. And that's it. Those are your confirmation levels. So that's all I got to say about that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure whatever you find on this, again, it sounds really arrogant to say stuff like this, but I'm pretty confident whatever you find on it is going to result in a similar finding to what I'm talking about in terms of levels. Because that's the way these things build out. They usually build out towards some EMA somewhere. Like, I don't have my EMAs on, but I'm sure we can find them. Here, let's put the 90. So the 90's right here. So you'd cross the 90 at 60 cents if you jumped. You know what I mean? Like, okay, so that's basically just jumping over this 50-50 right here. 1, 2. It's always like that. I don't know if that's because it needs to be or if it's just because of the way that the math is. Like, I just don't know. I don't have an answer. On the next time frame, it's pretty high. That's up here at, it looks like if you went straight up for it, you'd probably get there. Depends on when you get there. But you'd probably get there if you went the way I have it at 112. I mean, it's positioning the same direction. It's right here. It's really similar. So maybe you intercept that at $1.12. And if it breaks that, then you've got the 50-50 here. So I mean, like, it's always like that. I don't want to make it sound like there's some kind of perfect fit all the time, but then the next one's the same way. It's like up here. It's positioning down. It's like, okay, so then if we go up again, you know, you end up back up here at 250 or whatever. There it is. You know, it would be there when you get there. Every layer. So those are my basic EMAs. Darn it, something bit me on the wrist. Little bloodsucker. You know what? I think I felt it too. I felt something. As long as it's not bed bugs, I don't care. So it's a pretty strong chart. I'm feeling good about it. It looks good on the hourly. It's like a little leap above. It can hold. It should just push. Did you imagine if we made like 400% on something like dinky like this? No offense, but something like kind of dinky, and then you're like, AMC goes like 100%. You expected that to be like the big one. There's just some dinky side play. It's always like that, isn't it? Yeah, AMC, look, like as a play, AMC is kind of awful. I think we all come to understand that. So is GME to some extent. You know, the big picture on these stocks is that they run really hard and then they sell off and kill your options and kill everything else for a long time. Like, that's just the nature of them. They don't tend to be very exciting day over day. There are big run-ups, and if you catch them, you're usually really happy, but the best way to trade a range is always to kind of hot potato those options. Just buy them and then sell them really quick. Like, it's usually the best way to get in and out and make money, because this stock tends to be on the big picture, like big run up, then die for a long time. That's the MO. Like, you know, big run up, then distribute forever. So I like that people bring some other things to my attention sometimes, and then I can look at those things and have other things to trade. I get pretty bored with just talking about AMC and GME. I haven't traded AMC in like over a month and a half. I think it was July was the last time I actively traded it. So it's been a long time. I'm just not trading it. Like, there's nothing for me to trade. I don't like little tiny swings on it right now. I'm just kind of waiting for the bigger moves. 10 more minutes. AMC chilling at 477. You know, honestly, it looks pretty good. It looks like it kind of hung its hat right here, and it's doing this up thrust to try to slide back through the creek, which was at like 480. So I'm feeling good about that 471, and then we may end up dipping down. We'll see. I don't know about the rest of this. It's kind of speculative in terms of like spring actions and stuff. But I like the look of it so far. I really do. I think it looks good. I think it should be setting up. This has obviously not happened. We'll keep that on the chart for later, but it probably won't be right away. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what the setup brings here, you know. How soon do you think till WTD would pop? You talking about WTO? It might look a D on your screen. How soon? I mean, I actually thought like Friday. There's nothing intrinsically interesting about these targets. They were basically like Friday, and then the next Friday, and then the next Friday. It was literally, the pivots were Friday the 13th, Friday the 20th, Friday the 27th. So any of those could be potential where that move starts. I don't know. The market's kind of slumping right now, and that's fine. It makes some sense to me. Basically going back to zero on IWM for close. There's nothing, 0% change. It looks like it's trying to break that creek. Hasn't quite gotten there yet. Massive sell back through here. So not looking too hot. But this has happened on IWM before and been kind of bullish, so I don't want to overthink it. All right, I'll just wait. Once it breaks this level here, it's probably done at like 219 area. But until that point, there's no reason to like overthink it. It's just kind of waiting on it to do something. But yeah, if the market slumps, I don't know what happens to WTO. I don't really know how it's been reacting with the market, so I wouldn't know what to say. It's a penny stock. It's at 50 cents. I genuinely don't think it's going to stay at 50 cents. I would say within the next couple of weeks, I would expect it to move. It's not an options play. You really can't trade it like that anyways. So it would just be buying and holding on a swing over a couple weeks at most. So I don't think it's a super long-term play. Like, I genuinely think it could be this week. But if it did pop, even then, there's a possibility it comes back down again. So you want to keep those kind of windows open for what could happen. So right now, I'm really just looking at that push up to about $1, maybe 96 cents up to $1.12, $1.11. That's the first trade. And then if it has some kind of pullback, to me, that's like an opportunity to buy back in. It may make sense to you if you bought in low just to try to hold through the whole thing. You're like, well, I don't care. It's only a couple weeks. Yeah, you make it a good deal. But my concern is that if it doesn't advance past $1, it comes back down to like 50 cents or something. Again, like, and then you're just kind of wasting your time. So that's why I'm wondering. It could just rocket, yeah. Head right up to 250, you make a bunch of money. I don't think I'd make that much. I mean, I bought a lot, but stock's not worth that much, so you have to buy like a ton to make a ton on it. I didn't buy a ton, you know. It's like you buy a couple hundred shares and you would be like, whoa, that's a lot, but it's not really that much money. So it's like, Well, so much for the day. Guess I'm going to head out. Weird day today. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me, those that stuck with it. I'll be here tomorrow, maybe. I don't know. I'll try to come on tomorrow if it makes sense. I'll be here. I'd like to try to watch the rest of the week and see how it plays out. Definitely got AMC and GME in my headlights here. I'm just kind of waiting to see what happens. Not quite done yet with this move. And I didn't talk much about MPW. I sort of feel like this is a big part of the pullback that was expected. And then big picture, I'm not sure yet. Maybe enough, may not be enough. So I'm just sort of waiting. I would have expected this to be the bigger move backwards, so I'm still thinking down, but I told you guys, like, I exited like 10% of my position. It wasn't a lot, so that I could reposition if it comes back down. And maybe that's a risk that I didn't need to take. But it was speaking to my thoughts about what we potentially see here. Yeah. So, all right. I'll see you guys. Thanks again. And I will catch up with you tomorrow.